She was always the kind of woman who put love into the details. She knew her husband's coffee, the way he smiled from the corner of his eye, the silence that hid tiredness or lies. Lara didn't ask for much. She just wanted love, respect, and truth. But she ended up getting silence, distance, and in the end, betrayal. Her name is Lara, and you need to hear this story until the end. Because when she discovered the betrayal, she didn't scream. She didn't make a fuss. She prepared. A dinner. The marriage seemed solid. 8 years together with Paolo. He, a businessman, always in a hurry. She, dedicated, divided between work and home, but the touch cooled off. Kissing became an obligation. His cell phone was always turned upside down, and Lara, who knew the signs of love, began to recognize those of betrayal. For weeks she tried to convince herself it was all in her head, that he was stressed, that it was just a phase. Until one night, confirmation came. A friend contacted her privately and sent her a photo. It was Paolo, with another woman, hand in hand, laughing, in a restaurant on the other side of town. There, something inside Lara died. But she didn't cry. Not yet. She just thought, breathed, and decided. She was going to act in a way no one expected. She didn't make a fuss. She set up a table, and at that dinner, there were 3 places: hers, her husband's, and her lover's. Before we continue, I want to hear from you. What would you do if you were in Lara's shoes? How would you react if you caught such a cruel betrayal? Leave your comment, like and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapters of this exciting story full of twists and turns.
Hello, my name is Lara. I never imagined that I would have to tell this story like this, so openly, so exposed, but I need to. I need to get this weight off my chest, this anguish that has been eating away at me since that fateful day when my life changed forever. I have always been a trustworthy woman, a person who believed in love, sincerity, and partnership. That is why, when the first suspicions began to arise, my heart struggled to accept reality. I saw messages on his cell phone, noticed changes in his behavior, and the excuses that seemed more rehearsed every day. Everything seemed like a game I didn't know how to play, a piece I couldn't fit into. Nights turned into days of doubts and internal questions. I wondered if I was crazy, if I was making things up, or if my intuition, that little voice deep in my chest, was really right. And it was. I just didn't want to believe that the person I loved most could betray me. That discovery came unexpectedly. I wasn't looking for clues, I wasn't hunting for clues. I was just going about my daily routine, until one afternoon I received a message that froze me. It was from a person I had never imagined existed in that equation. The words were clear, too intimate, too revealing. That moment was the beginning of the end of my world as I knew it. I could have exploded, screamed, cried, but no. Inside me something broke, but something also grew stronger. I decided that I would face everything head on. Not to destroy, not to humiliate, but to show that I still had a voice, that I deserved respect, that my pain deserved to be heard. That was how I planned that dinner. A dinner that would be the stage for the truth, where the masks fell and the wounds were exposed. I invited them to sit at the table with me. He, my partner, and she, the other woman. It was not an easy decision, and many times I thought about giving up, about running away from that unbearable situation. But my desire to understand, to confront the betrayal was greater. During that dinner, the words came loaded with emotion, accusation, regret, and silence. I saw in their eyes everything that had previously been hidden. The guilt, the shame, the truth that I already knew but needed to hear in order to accept it. It was a moment of pain, but also of power over my own story. I know many will judge, say that I should have acted differently, that the best thing would have been to simply end it all without looking back. But that is not my story. I chose to face it, choose my terms, give voice to my pain, and who knows, find some kind of peace in the midst of that chaos. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced something similar? How would you react if you were in my shoes? Comment, share your experience, like, and don't forget to subscribe to follow each chapter of this true story that will not leave you indifferent. Since that dinner, my mind has not stopped spinning in circles. The images of that night haunt me. Every word spoken still resonates painfully within me. I couldn't believe that I was there, sitting between them, trying to understand what happened, trying to digest the betrayal that until then seemed impossible. I remember the look on my partner's face clearly, a mixture of guilt, fear, and perhaps regret. I needed to hear from him everything I didn't have the courage to say. I asked, my voice shaking, why? Why did he choose to hide this from me? Why did he make me believe that we were happy, that we were a team? He tried to explain, but his words weren't enough to fill the void I felt in my chest. And then there was her. The other woman, who until recently I hadn't even known existed, was standing there in front of me, trying to justify her choices, trying to minimize the pain she was causing. I couldn't understand how two people could be so cruel. It was like I was watching a movie, but it was my life, my soul that was being torn apart. I spent days wondering where I went wrong, if I could have done something differently to avoid all of this. Was I not enough? Was my love not big enough? These questions consumed me, and each answer I sought only increased my suffering. But in the midst of this storm, something began to change inside me. The pain, which had previously been just sadness, began to transform into a silent force. I realized that I needed to value myself, that I deserved more than lies and betrayals. And that was when I began to chart my path to find myself again, to rebuild my shattered self-esteem. I know that not everyone understands why I chose that dinner, why I decided to face the situation that way. Many say that I should have ended it all immediately, without looking back. But for me, it was different. That night was my act of courage, my way of saying I deserve the truth. I want you to reflect with me. What is harder, running away from pain or facing it head on? What would you do if you were in my shoes? Leave your comment, like the video, and share this story. Your opinion is very important to me and to everyone who goes through similar situations. After that dinner that changed everything, the feeling of being torn between the past and the future never left me. I couldn't just turn the page like many told me to do. It was as if my heart was trapped in a tight knot, unable to free itself. I needed to understand what that betrayal really meant to me, not just as a betrayed woman, but as a person who believed in love and commitment. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions. I tried to talk to him, my partner, to seek some clarity, some explanation that could help me forgive and move on. But his silence was a cold, impenetrable wall. The distance that had never existed between us before grew, and I felt alone, even though I was in the same house as him. The hardest part was dealing with the image of that other woman, not just because of the betrayal itself, but because she was there, occupying a space that I thought was mine alone. I felt a deep anger, but also a sadness that consumed me. Why her? Why wasn't I enough? These questions repeated themselves like a broken record in my mind. But I can't deny that, at the same time, I began to know myself better. I began to realize my own flaws, my limits, and most importantly, my worth. The betrayal, as painful as it was a shock that woke me up. I began to understand that I deserve respect, that I deserve true love, and that this is not negotiable. It was during this process that I decided to distance myself a little, not only from him but also from the people around me, to focus on myself. I needed to rediscover the Lara that existed before the betrayal, the strong, determined woman capable of rising from the ashes. I really want you to reflect on this. Have you ever felt betrayed in a way that shook your self-esteem? How did you deal with the pain? Comment below, leave your like, and subscribe to the channel to follow the next chapters of this true story that stirs deep feelings. After everything I've been through, I thought I'd already felt all the pain possible. But the truth is that pain changes shape, transforms, and finds new ways to get through to us. The first few days after that dinner, it was like I was numb. I walked around the house like a ghost, doing everything on autopilot. Cooking, making, the bed ironing. It was as if my body was there but my soul wasn't. And inside, I just wanted to disappear. The worst part was that he continued to act as if nothing had happened. He continued to live with me, share the same roof, sometimes even starting conversations with me quite naturally. But I could no longer look at him the same way I used to. There was a new coldness in my eyes, a constant distrust. Every word that came out of his mouth seemed like a lie. And even when he tried to be kind, I held back. Because deep down, what I feared most was believing again. I know that many women decide to break up right away. They take their things or kick the cheater out without looking back. But it wasn't like that for me. I needed time to process everything, to understand what to do with that pain. I had a life with him. We shared bills, memories, plans. It wasn't just any relationship. It was a construction. And he destroyed it all with a selfish choice. There was one day in particular that I will never forget. I had gone out for a walk alone in a park near my house. I sat on a bench and started watching an elderly couple holding hands, laughing, walking slowly. That scene broke me inside. Because it was exactly what I had always dreamed of. And I thought, will I ever be able to experience something like that? Or has betrayal killed this hope inside me once and for all? That was the day I decided to start writing. I grabbed an old notebook and started writing everything down. My feelings, my fears, my most confusing thoughts. I wrote non-stop, as if that was the only way to keep from going crazy. And that's when I realized something I had forgotten for years. I always liked writing, ever since I was a teenager. But over time, I started to let it go. My routine, my relationship, my problems, everything kept me away from myself. In a way, the betrayal was a trigger for me to reconnect with myself. It may seem strange to say this, almost cruel even, but it was. It was as if I had been pushed off an abyss, and in the fall, I found parts of myself that had been buried. For a long time. I started to remember Lara, who laughed out loud, who dreamed big, who wanted to travel the world, meet new people, live intensely. Where had she been all this time? And when I remembered her, I also began to regain my courage. I started to leave the house more, to meet up with friends that I had distanced myself from because of him. One of them, Julia, welcomed me with open arms. When I told her everything that had happened, she didn't say, "I told you so." She just hugged me and said, "You're not alone." And that was what I needed to hear the most. Because inside I felt completely isolated. There was one night more recently when he tried to talk to me again. He said he regretted it, that it had been a mistake, and that he was willing to do anything to make it right. but all I could do was look at him and ask, "Would you have the courage to have dinner with me and the man I cheated on you with, like I did with you?" He lowered his eyes. He didn't say anything, because he knew he wouldn't. He knew that only I had the courage to face that situation head on. There I realized the extent of my strength. No, I haven't forgiven him. Not yet. And maybe I never will. But I'm also no longer the woman he thought he could deceive. And that, in itself, is already a victory. If you've ever been through something like this, if you felt this mix of pain, anger, and reconstruction, comment below. I want to hear from you. I want to know how you dealt with it. Like this video, share it with someone who needs this strength, and subscribe to the channel because my story isn't over yet. The truth is, even after everything I had discovered, even after I was sure of what was happening, I was still trying to find the strength to understand how I got myself into that situation. Because deep down, even with all the anger, with all the sadness, with all the shame, there was still love. And it is this love that makes us betray ourselves too. We betray ourselves when we accept less than we deserve, when we remain silent in the face of a pain that we should scream about. That day, after dinner, when I closed the door and left them in the living room, my head was spinning as if I were in a hurricane. I went straight to my room, took off the dress I had chosen with so much care, with so much irony, and stood in front of the mirror. I looked at myself as if I were a stranger. Was that woman over there me? The woman who set an emotional trap, who humiliated herself in front of them just to see if he would waver? What kind of revenge was this that left me with the taste of blood in my mouth? I felt dirty. I felt weak. Because deep down I wanted him to choose me. For him to look at me and say, "Lara, forgive me. I'm an idiot, but I love you." But he didn't. Not that night. Not the next day. He acted as if nothing had happened, as if that dinner was just another one of my eccentricities. The lover, the one called Carla, left after a while. Awkward, uncomfortable, but she left. And he stayed, as if everything was fine, as if I had served him lasagna and told a bad joke. I locked myself in my room for 2 days. He would knock on the door and ask if I wanted to eat something, as if everything was normal, as if I hadn't rubbed it in his face that I knew everything. Until, on the 3rd day, I left. I went to the living room where he was watching TV. I stood there looking at him and asked, "You're not going to say anything?" He looked at me a little surprised, as if this conversation was inconvenient. "Say what, Lara?" And then I knew. I knew there would be no apology. There would be no regret. There would be no redemption. He had already made his choice. And that choice wasn't about love. It was about ego. It was about control. He was comfortable with the idea that he could cheat on me, get caught, be confronted, and still stay. Because he believed I would accept it. That I wouldn't leave. That I needed him more than he needed me. That night, after that dry conversation, I made my decision. I started packing my things. He noticed. He asked where I was. Going. I said I didn't know yet, but that it wasn't my place anymore. He laughed. He laughed, as if it were all a play, as if I was just putting on a show. "Lara, stop it. You're being too dramatic. It was just a mix-up, a need. It happens." And there I understood everything. For him, cheating was a human flaw. Forgiving was my obligation. Feeling pain was drama. He didn't understand that trust is a bridge, and he had burned down the bridge and still blamed me for not wanting to cross. I left that night, with 2 suitcases and a broken heart, I went to my sister's house and cried like a child, and in the following days, loneliness took the place of pain, and I began to rebuild. One step at a time, I began to remember who I was before him, the things I liked, the songs that made me feel good, the colours I stopped wearing because he didn't like them. I started writing too, short texts, rants, and each word freed me a little more. I started posting on social media, and other women started commenting, sharing. Similar stories, similar pain. And I saw myself as part of something bigger. I wasn't the only one. I wasn't weak. I wasn't stupid. I was just a woman who loved too much, and who had the courage to leave when love turned to poison. Today, looking back, I know that Lara from dinner no longer exists, that Lara needed proof. Today, I no longer need anyone to prove anything to me. Because I am enough. Because I respect myself. Because I learned that love cannot be a contract of submission. That fidelity is not a favour. It is the bare minimum. And if you've come this far with me, I want to ask you, what would you do in my place? Would you have the courage to stay or leave? Have you ever been through something like this? Tell me in the comments, because your story can help another woman to recognise herself. And if this story touched your heart in any way, like the video, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next real stories like this one. That night, after everything happened, I sat on the edge of my bed and stared into space. The house was strangely silent, heavy, as if everything had changed, and it really did. I could still taste the wine from dinner, but now it was bitter, mixed with the taste of truth. Betrayal was no longer just a suspicion, now it was a certainty. A certainty that had dinner with me, looked me in the eyes and then stabbed me in the back. I slept badly, waking up all the time, with that look of his haunting me. That look of someone who knows he's been caught, but still tries to manipulate. Deep down, I think he didn't believe I would have the courage to face it, that I would continue to be the same Lara as always, quiet, understanding, who avoids fights, who swallows her tears to keep the peace. But that Lara had died there, in that dining room. The next day he left early. He said he was going to take care of some work issues, and I was left alone with the silence. But it was no longer a peaceful silence. It was a silence that screamed inside me. I decided not to reply to messages, not to answer calls. I needed to be with myself, to understand what would come next. And it was in that silence that I decided that he no longer deserved my fear, nor my passivity. I called an old friend who had also been through betrayal. She listened to me without judging, cried with me, and said a phrase that stuck in my head. You don't have to decide now. You just have to remember who you are without him. And that shook me. Who was I without him? I was a whole woman, sensitive, loyal. I was a Lara who believed in love, and who deserved something reciprocal. But he kept erasing that version of me with every lie he told. That afternoon, I went into the closet and started sorting through my things. It wasn't for him to leave. It was for me. I didn't want to live in that house full of false memories anymore. I grabbed 2 suitcases, put some clothes, my work stuff, my laptop, documents, and left them on the bed. He arrived at the end of the day, looking normal, pretending nothing had happened. "Can we talk?" he asked. I just nodded, sitting on the couch. He started talking about how confused he was, how complicated everything was, how his involvement with the other woman hadn't meant anything. That he loved me, that he was willing to fight. And there, listening to him babble, I saw how convincing he thought he was, how he was used to lying without trembling. I let him talk. I remained silent. And when he finished that poorly rehearsed act, I asked, "Would you sleep peacefully if it were the other way around? If I were the one who had betrayed you, lied to you, put someone else in our bed, laughed with him about the way he slept, the way he spoke, the way he loved me?" He swallowed hard, lowered his eyes. And then I calmly got up, went to the bedroom, grabbed my bags and said, "I don't hate you, but loving me is also knowing how to leave." He stood there, stunned. He couldn't believe I was really leaving, that the woman he had always controlled was now walking out of his life without looking back. I went to my sister's house that night. I slept on a mattress on the floor, but it was the lightest sleep I'd had in months. The pain was there, sure, but for the first time it didn't paralyze me. It gave me strength. It was like I was finally feeling the truth and understanding what it meant to truly respect myself. Days later, he sent messages, flowers and messages from friends. He said he regretted it, that he wanted to start over. But I was already in another place. Not geographically, but emotionally. I was no longer that woman who accepted crumbs of love. I was Lara, and I had remembered who I was without him. Have you ever felt this way too? Have you ever been in a situation where you had to rebuild yourself from scratch after a brutal disappointment? Tell me in the comments, I'll read it with an open heart. And if this story touched you in any way, leave a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it today. I thought the end of the story would be the worst moment, but it wasn't. The worst part was the beginning again, because after we get over a betrayal, the world seems the same, but we are no longer the same. And no one tells us that grieving a living relationship is harder than grieving something that has died. You keep seeing the person, remembering their touch, their smell, their routine, but everything they gave you now tastes like poison. In the first few days after leaving home, I was on autopilot. I brushed my teeth, ate, answered work messages, but inside I was in pieces. Sometimes I caught myself thinking, did I overdo it? Could it be that I couldn't forgive him? Did he really love me but just lost himself for a moment? But the truth is that cheating is never a mistake. It's a choice. Repeated, planned, hidden. He cheated on me with someone from work. It wasn't just once, and it wasn't just physical. He laughed with her, he made plans, he compared, he belittled me, and he still had the audacity to keep looking me in the eyes, lying in my bed, telling me he loved me. That, to me, was the cruelest thing. It wasn't just a body that he shared. It was intimacy. It was trust. It was the place that was just ours. A month later, he tried again. He called me to talk. He said he had broken up with her, that he wanted to rebuild, that I was the love of his life. And this time, I listened with a different kind of pain. A less desperate, more lucid pain, because now I could see. I saw who he was, and I saw who I was with him. And that wasn't love. It was dependence. It was fear. It was the reflection of a woman who lost herself trying to sustain something that only she carried. I said no. I said it firmly. And he cried. He cried a lot. For the first time, perhaps, he understood that he lost me. Not because of another woman, but because he killed me inside. And there were no flowers, messages or tears that could bring that Lara back. Because now the Lara that existed was different. She was one who knew her worth, who had the courage to be alone, even with a broken heart, who knew that no love is worth its own destruction. Today, 6 months have already passed. There are still days when I cry, when I miss someone, when I remember the little things and ask myself, why did it have to be like this? But then I take a deep breath, look in the mirror and say to myself, it was like this because you needed to wake up. You needed to come out of the shadows. You needed to remember that you deserve more. I went back to therapy. I met up with friends I had distanced myself from because of his jealousy. I signed up for a course he said was nonsense. I cut my hair, I dyed it. I started changing on the outside, but it was just a reflection of what was changing on the inside. And you know what? For the first time in a long time, I started to love myself again. It's not easy. Overcoming betrayal is a process. It's not a straight line. There are setbacks, there are doubts, there are hurts that take a long time to heal. But I learned that we survive. That we learn to live with the lack and then fill that void with our own presence. I am my best company now. And no, I'm not ready for another love yet. But I am ready for myself. If I could go back in time, I wouldn't change a thing. Not the dinner, not the confrontation, not the pain, because all of this has brought me here. It has shown me that the woman he tried to erase survived, and now she shines brighter than ever. And to you who have listened to my story so far, thank you. I really do. If you are going through something similar, or have already gone through it, I want to tell you, you are not alone. Your pain is real, your story matters, and you will be okay. It will hurt, it will seem like there is no way out, but there is. And sometimes, what we fear most, the end, is just the beginning of something much more real. Would you have the courage to do the same? Would you have the strength to leave everything behind in the name of self-love? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story too. And if this journey touched you in any way, leave a like, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe to the channel. Here, we transform pain into strength.